I'm down here at the site of our pear tree. You can see there's hundreds, if not 1,000 pears in that tree behind me. But I was just mowing and I noticed there was a ton of pears all over the ground. If they're falling off the tree, they're probably ripe. So I'm going to sort through these and see if I can collect any of them that have not been eaten by deer yet. Just across the driveway from our pear tree is our wild grapevine. I'm not sure if you can see this, but a few of the clusters are starting to turn purple. We've seen a few singular purple grapes over the last few weeks, but most of those have been damaged by insects, and that's why the fruit had prematurely ripened. But after this big hurricane that came through and all those pears being on the ground, I thought I would check this. And sure enough, this plant does seem to be struggling a bit. A lot of the leaves are turning. So I'm wondering if it's the natural time to send the rest of the energy to the fruit to ripen it. And that's why the leaves are kind of turning. I'm going to start picking the clusters like these and see how they taste. So I've reverted back to editing my videos in bulk just because it's kind of stressful to have to edit a video every week without knowing if something's going to happen. So for instances like this, I'm going to refer to myself as Future Ben. We actually recorded this about a month ago, so I can tell you from experience that we actually did figure out something to do with these grapes. You should go ahead and subscribe to our channel and look out for our next produce-related video, and it's going to show what we did with these grapes. And speaking of produce, this is our corn from about a month ago, and once the ears became big enough, Angie decided it was time to pick them. So I'm going to turn this over to her because she planted this entire Three Sisters garden and has pretty much maintained these crops by herself this summer.
In the Three Sisters garden, I planted a short season sweet corn. It's a hybrid that's supposed to grow 2 ears per stalk, and I really only got 1 ear off of each stalk, but I still ended up with a few dozen ears of corn. I also tried to transplant some corn seedlings into another bed, and they did not thrive. I didn't get any corn out of there, but I did find some corn smut. I wondered if it had grown because the plant was stressed out. It took about 60 days from the day I planted the corn seeds to the day I harvested the ears. Now this corn is ready to harvest all at the same time, which is typical of corn, but that's way too much to eat at once. So I had several dozen ears of corn that I needed to put away for future use. I like to blanch corn before I freeze it. Blanching is putting fruits or vegetables into boiling water for a short amount of time, a minute or two, and then quickly moving it to ice water. This process preserves the quality of the food so that it doesn't degrade in the freezer. The last step of storing the corn is I put about a week's worth of corn wrapped up in cellophane, and then I put these bundles in gallon-size freezer bags. That way I can pull out a week's worth at a time and keep the rest in the freezer. Also, it's so that they don't all stick together in one big block. I planted some pole string beans for the Three Sisters garden. I planted it after the corn so that the beans can grow up the corn as a trellis. Also, the corn was ready to harvest before the beans are done, so I just left the corn stalks. I've only grown green beans. I've never grown pinto beans or garbanzo beans, although I'd be interested in growing those. Just don't have any experience yet. So I might try that next year or some other time. Do you have any experience growing those? Let me know in the comments. So these beans can be harvested continuously. Once they start flowering, they'll keep flowering, and you could go out, pick some green beans, and then a couple days later, pick some more green beans. So we like to go and pick them a few meals at a time and then eat them steamed or sauteed. We like to eat them fresh. You have to snap them, like there's these fibers that run along the outside, so you snap the top off and pull the strings out and then break them up and cook them down. I have made dilly beans before, which is kind of like the same brine as dill pickles, but with beans instead of cucumbers. And those are really good. I recommend giving them a try if you haven't. It's pretty easy to make a refrigerator style if you don't want to go through the canning process. I don't think we're going to do that this year, but it is another way I know how to use these green beans. If I ever grow the dry beans, I'll need to figure out how to dry and store those. But pinto beans are my favorite bean, so it would be worthwhile for me to experiment with growing them. The seed packets for both the sugar pie pumpkin and the little ornamental pumpkin said they'll be ready to harvest in 110 days. So I was surprised that these little ornamental pumpkins were ready around the same time as the corn. That means it only took 60 to 70 days for them to be ready. I mean, they're really small, so I'm not that surprised, but it's just a big discrepancy between the time that it was ready to harvest and what the seed packet said. Now, the sugar pie pumpkins, they're still out in the field. One of them might be ready pretty soon. It's got a lot of orange on them. There's about 6 pumpkins out there that are still green, no orangey, but hopefully some of them get ripe. I like to process the sugar pie pumpkins and make pumpkin bread, pumpkin pie, pumpkin butter. I really love pumpkin, so I hope that we get some food out of the deal. These little ornamental pumpkins, they were just cute for the fall season. There's not really any food in there. We're just going to have them sitting around and Cedar can play with them and we could look at them. If you want to see how we process the sugar pie pumpkins, go ahead and like and subscribe. And we'll see you back here next time on Kind Heart Homestead.